I'm a OG boy. Know that they ride or die. I keep boys by my side. Know that they ride or die. I keep boys by my side. OG boy.
Day we hustle, but the night we
OG boy. Know that they ride or die. I'm a OG boy.
Hey, what's up, you guys? How's it going today? I have another story that I want to bring to you guys. And it seems like every time I try to do a story, my throat wants to act up, or somebody wants to call, or my little champ wants to call me. But anyway, I found this article, and it was written in 2012, but I see something down here that said at Nev more 2002. So I don't know what that means, but it says CPS is breaking the law and kidnapping children, and it says here are the facts. So this was posted on September the 25th, 2012 by Donnelly Justice. I'm sorry, I can't see my words ahead of time. If you hear me messing up on my words, it's because on the screen the words look readable to you, but to me they are very, very tiny because I'm using a program to get this story out. And it reads, State's Child Protection Agency colludes with judges to defund the defraud. See, I told you, to defraud the federal government. All right. Now I have to look very, very closely because I'm on a tiny device. Okay. So in 1974, Walter Mondale initiated CAPTA. CAPTA stands for the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, the legislation that began feeding federal funding into the state's child welfare agencies. With remarkable foresight, Mondale expressed concerns that the legislation could lead to systematic abuse and that the state's agencies might overprocess children into the system unnecessarily to keep and increase the flow of federal dollars. Shortly after CAPTA was enacted, there was a dramatic increase in the number of children in foster care, peaking at around 500,000 during the mid-70s. That's over 50 years ago, you guys. This has been going on longer than some of you guys have been alive, okay? And you're new parents, and you're just now becoming grandparents for the first time. So George Miller, the chairman of the Federal Select Committee on Children, Youth, and Families, initiated an intensive investigation of the nation's foster care system after the effects of CAPTA started to become apparent by the soaring number of children who were being placed in foster care. An official at the U.S. Department of Health, Education, and Welfare admitted to Miller that the government had no idea where many of the nation's 500,000 foster children were living. This is scary because you can imagine if these were any of your siblings, because I say in the 70s, some of you guys may not have been born yet, but can you imagine some of your siblings still to this day have not been heard from, and it's taking pretty much Facebook and all these different social medias in order to find your siblings. And I have a success story. I have a sibling that was in foster care, and my sibling was able to find me via Facebook, and we have been talking ever since. And I'm so grateful because I've always wondered, where my family's some of my families that were adopted out, where are they? And we got a chance to, catch up, and we don't talk every single day, but when we talk, it's almost like we never stop talking. It's like we talk every single day. So that's the good part about that. But this is terrible that, over 500,000 foster children were living with, not knowing, people not knowing where they are. Okay. And what services they were receiving, if any, or any efforts were being made to reunite them with their families, and most of the time they will not and have not reunited these kids with their families because they get a bonus. I'm talking about the social workers get a bonus for each child that does not get returned back home, according to the reports that I have read and the summaries that I have read. To address the obvious free for all snatching of children that CAPTA had stimulated, the committee crafted new federal legislations with the intent of creating accountability and clearer guidelines for the state's child welfare agencies. During the crafting of, I think this is a law, you guys, PL 96272. Chairman Miller's concern was that the federal government was footing the bill for warehousing children in institutions and inappropriate settings without accountability. So what Miller was saying is that he believed that these institutions, these child services, were putting kids in places that the government knew nothing of. They were saying that all these kids were being, mishandled, and so the government was paying money, for the children that were in foster care. So I think, to me, that it was a horrible situation that took place. So I already read that in addressing the obvious free-for-all snatching of children that CAPTA has stimulated, the committee crafted new federal legislations with the intent of creating accountability and clearer guidelines for the state's child welfare agencies. During the crafting PL 96272, Chairman Miller's concerns was that the federal government was footing the bill for warehousing children in institutions and inappropriate settings without accountability. In 1980, the Adoption Assistance and Child Welfare Act PL 96272 was enacted. The act included provisions that reasonable efforts be made to prevent children from being unnecessarily removed from their homes and placed in foster care. Although CPS has always tried to buffalo the media and the public that they are involved with families due to some sort of horrific child abuse or neglect, there has never been any debate among national policymakers, researchers, and federal agencies that the vast majority of CPS cases are due to poverty or frivolous social reasons and do not contain elements of real child abuse. If the case did actually involve acts of abuse, they would be criminal, right? So if it was true that every person that they accused of abusing their child, mistreating their child, neglecting their child, abandoning their child, there should be some criminal case against them with evidence being proven, not some fictitious evidence, but real life evidence, and not coercion of children and getting them to say that mommy and daddy did this, because a kid will say anything, especially they like to repeat things that they hear. I say funny stuff all day to my little champ, and he'll repeat it, and I'm like, really? And so I'll say, the cow jumped over the moon. He'll go, yeah, the cow jumped over the moon, knowing that the cow didn't jump over the moon. They're just trying to appease you and please you to say what you want them to say back, thinking that they're going to be rewarded. And normally when I do that, we both laugh, and I give him a big kiss and a big hug because it's funny. That's my little champ right there. He's a good baby too. So let me get back to where I was. All right. Okay. And it says something about criminal. Okay. Identified and investigated by law enforcement rather than social workers. So what they're saying here is there should be some investigation going on. There should be maybe some lie detectors or something that goes on that will prove that the parents are innocent and not just go by the social worker's word, because we have seen lately that there have been social workers that have been arrested for falsifying information, having children taken out of homes, and having false cases up against parents that never did anything to their children. So I'm grateful that something is changing where these people are at least getting some type of relief from this crazy system. Okay, and would be prosecuted as such under, I guess, the PL 96272, which came into effect partly because Congress determined that a large number of children were being unnecessarily removed from their homes, and once removed they were lost in limbo. That's crazy. Of the foster care for years, many until they just grew too old, when they were then just put out on the streets at age 18. And I was saying in my earlier videos that if you get a foster child, there should be some type of money that is automatically sent into a bank account for that child's future, for that child to decide whether they want to go to school or not. I don't think that all that money should go into your hands to do what you want to do. So I feel like that child should not be able to touch that money until that child is 18 years old. I think that there should be some type of vocational training for that child, or free, what do you call it, community college of some sort. And with the money that the foster parent absolutely had to put aside, should be money that is put aside also, whether it be college or for future housing. And then when they leave at the age of 18, they will have a nest egg, a cushion. They won't be out on the streets because they would have had all this money for all these years, where they could possibly go ahead and get themselves an apartment, or they can purchase themselves a vehicle, where they won't just be out in the streets homeless, living in tents, maybe leading into drug addiction, prostitution, or becoming a victim of violence, or getting stuck on drugs, because that's normally what happens when people don't have resources to take care of themselves. They get caught up in a whirlwind. Okay, the Child Welfare League of America testified before a Senate subcommittee. In fact, there were many instances then and as of now, children being removed unnecessarily from their families. It is important to recognize that children are almost always traumatized by removal from their own families, and it's true. So accountability from each state child protective agency was also written in. So they do need to be accountable for the stuff that they're doing. They need to come down with a mighty hammer. Even though it's making millions and millions and billions of dollars, there still should be some accountability when they find out, just like any other job. If you get caught lying on your job, you get fired. No ands, if, buts, or whats. You get fired, and whatever damages you do during that job, the agency or that job is accountable. That's why they have insurance. So it should not be hard for them to get restitution and financial a financial reward for a social worker that have sent them through turmoil and hell. Okay, so it says to receive the federal money, the states would have to submit an annual report to the federal government known as an AFCARS. I'll say it like the AFCARS report. That specifically accounts for each child in state care. ACLU Children's Rights Project attorney Marsha Robinson Lowry explained in her testimony to Congress, as a condition of federal funding, states must have a reasonable information system to identify children in federally funded state custody. These requirements were implemented in the 1980s. Up until 1999, some states were still not filing their federally required AFCARS report to the federal government, according to Jeffrey Locke, former commissioner of the Massachusetts Department of Social Services. The excuse to the legislation was that they couldn't figure out how to work their computer system. Then guess what? Since you can't work your computer system, you don't get no funding until you figure it out. You don't get any funding until you get somebody that is computer legit, you know what I mean, literate. So if you can't figure it out, you don't get no dollars. And guess what? If you don't get no dollars, don't nobody want them kids. So you're going to have to send them back home to their parents and their families. So let me continue. When I called Senator Teresa Murray in 1998 to ask how many children had died in foster care in Massachusetts, her aide replied, "We don't have those statistics." At that time, Senator Murray was the Senate chair of the Committee of Health and Elderly Affairs, and therefore responsible to oversee the collection and the filing of AFSCAR data. So they didn't even tell people, they didn't even know how many people passed away. But I read another story where a child was in foster care, and I don't know how I lost that article. I'm so angry with myself, I can't even find it. But there was 2 children in foster care with the family, and they buried both of those kids in their backyards. They were still getting funding from foster care, and the foster care people finally had to come out and do an assessment on the children. And that's when they found out that the kids had been deceased, and they buried those children in their backyards. They didn't know how the kids passed away, but a lot of people were saying that it was abuse and neglect. So this is where I say they keep dropping the ball, because how is it that you can have children in a system, but you're not checking up on these children? You're not doing anything. You're not sending your workers out. You're not sending out phone calls. You're not doing any FaceTime or anything to that magnitude. It only takes a few minutes to sit down and talk to somebody, just as well as you can go out, go to lunch, hang out with your friends, go to a party, do all that good old stuff. During your job hours, you can do the same thing. I think that all these workers should be held accountable for every child that is injured, that's molested, that's killed, or anything. I don't know if I could say that word. Or any harm that come to any child, and they have a caseworker, and it's not reported, or it has been reported too late, I think that those caseworkers, right along with the foster parents, needs to be convicted of the crime. And I don't care how they feel about it. This is my feelings. The reasonable efforts required were designed to address these issues by requiring the state's child welfare agencies to have specific investigations and assessment policies to minimize frivolous removals to provide services. To address the, you guys, I don't even know what that is. Ameliorates, I don't know what that means. Conditions that were detrimental to the child's well-being, to place children with relatives when removal from the home was absolutely necessary. And I think it's better that you move kids out and place them with a family member, not a stranger trying to make $1. Because if that's the family member, most likely family members are going to treat their siblings good, okay, and make efforts to reunite families in a timely fashion. Methods to audit and track compliance with federal requirements were also built in. The states were to establish citizens review panels comprised of a specially designated representative of the population, which would include not only members of collateral professionals communities involved in child protection, but parents, foster parents, and former foster children. Each state was to have at least 3 citizen review panels. The panels would essentially act as standing jury and peers, and would review CPS cases. 20 years after PL 96272 went into effect, the citizen review panel have never been established in most states. And I think that if they don't do it, like I said, remove the funding. That's all you got to do. If you start taking money away because they're not doing what they're supposed to do, that mess will happen immediately. If you start snatching benefits away, wow, this is not even cool to know this. Wow, This is heartbreaking to me. Okay, let me continue. Another means of creating accountability was to have the federal authorities, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, conduct compliance audits, which are known as Section 427 reviews. The method of enforcement that Congress devised to ensure that the state followed the federal law was to provide incentive funds to the states that documented their compliance with the federal regulations. And they haven't been doing it. According to what this report says, the states would self-certify compliance, but could be subjected to periodic 427 reviews by the Department of Health and Human Services, where the states to find themselves in non-compliance, they would simply return the incentive funds. They ain't gonna do that. It was seen that providing cash to agencies that are allowed to self-document compliance is a somewhat less than intelligent system. It would be interesting to track down exactly how much money the state child protective agency have returned to the government because they found themselves in non-compliance. Gee, maybe it's a rocket science. Maybe it is rocket science. These people ain't gonna return no money. They're not going to comply with it until you actually take money from them. Continuously giving them money, they're going to continue to do what they want to do until you remove the funds from them. That's what it's going to take. And I'm telling you guys, I'm doing my best with this story because this writing is so small. I'm doing my very best, so all my fumbles and bumbles, please forgive me. Please forgive me. I'm trying to get this out. Like CAPTA PL 96272 could only have worked if the federal government demanded compliance and meticulous accountability and them impose sanctions for non-compliance. Even better, criminal charges for racketeering, for intentional fraud. Mark Soler, I think that's how you say his name, director of the National Youth Law Center in California, explained. Okay, come on, Callie. Let's see what you got. The Department of Health and Human Services has failed to see all these big old words, promulgate, meaningful regulations to implement the Adoption Assistance and Child Welfare Act. It has applied even the minimal federal regulations that were developed in an inconsistent and arbitrary manner, and only taken implementations of the law protecting children. Wow, this story is it's not boring. It's mind blowing. You saying all these different laws were set into place, and not one person is following any laws that you guys set into place. You were supposed to withhold funding from these places that are not complying with the law, but yet and still, with them being non-compliant, you're still giving them money. So you're still rewarding them in essence for bad behavior. You're still rewarding them for being, what do they call that? Insubordinate, however you say it. You're rewarding them. Why not just take the money and nobody gets anything until stuff starts happening? Writing all these articles about it, it's not going to help. It's not going to do any good. It's not going to make a difference. You have to take the funding away. If you take the funding away, then they'll be more likely to do their jobs. But as long as you're rewarding them, they're going to do what they want to do. This is why a lot of these social workers are buck wild and footloose and fancy free, because they feel like, oh, ain't nothing going to happen to me. And you guys are allowing it to happen. Even when HHS finds overwhelming evidence of lack of compliance during 427 reviews, no sanctions are imposed, and they continue to keep the federal money pouring in violation of their own regulations. See, this is what I'm saying. Not so much as a slap on the hand or even taking admonishment certainly explains how CPS developed their arrogance, yep, and contempt for any authority. Yes, they do. They do have that. It still goes back to the two missing California boys. Ain't nobody saying nothing. Nobody. Those boys are probably lost somewhere in the system because there is none. Their confidence that they are free from the feds insisting on compliance with the law is well illustrated by the foster care numbers, which increased dramatically after CAPTA began feeding federal dollars into the state's child protection agency, then dropped equally dramatic after the enactment of PL 96272, which was supposed to create more specific federal regulations and accountability. However, once the state agency saw that the federal government was not enforcing compliance, the foster care numbers soared once again. And this is what I'm saying. There's no accountability. If you don't take the money from them, they're going to keep doing what they want to do. And we're going to keep having these same results with nothing changing. Nobody's going to do anything. And then if somebody comes along and speak on it, you know, they want to get mad and they want to like knock you off because they feel like you're messing with their money. You know, it's not even their money. And this is what's crazy. Michael Petit, Deputy Director of the Child Welfare League of America, stated in his testimony before Congress, 427 is a meaningless process for most of the states. It represents no kind of sanctions to the states whatsoever for non-compliance. Marsha Robertson Laurie told Congress states are passing HHS audits with systems in which no reasonable person could consider that children are being well treated. It is virtually impossible to fail a 427 audit. Well, honey, I don't know who lied to you because apparently they failing everything. The audits, compliance, doing what they're supposed to do, snatching kids, stealing kids, lying on parents, causing false cases, doing what they want to do, having relationships with the absent parent, which is if it's a male or a female, you know, they doing the dang on thing. They having their way. They don't care nothing about what the government's saying because guess what? They don't have no accountability. Why should I care? That's like being on a job, not doing your job, and you come in there and kick your heels up. You on Facebook and every social media platform and on the phone doing hair and everything else. You supposed to be at work and you still getting paid, but you ain't doing your job. That's what it sounds like to me. The initial concept of reasonable effort was the only conclusion that any rational person could come to, rather than disrupt children's lives and traumatize them by seizing them from non-abusive situations and placing them with strangers who are often no better and sometimes for worse. Assist families in overcoming their obstacles and problems by providing support and services. The idea never worked, though, because it has always been more profitable to too many to remove children rather than keep them at home, rather than offer support and simple practical services to families. CPS forged contracts with vendors. Yep. Now private businesses under the guise of service providers could mushroom into existence, knowing that their sugar daddy CPS will provide a never-ending flow of course clients. The market potential is unlimited. Potentially every mother, father, grandparent, and child in the country, rather than offering practical meaningful services that are germane to the family's circumstances. CPS clients are ordered to engage in services with CPS contracted vendors, special interest groups who are dependent on CPS for their income and profit by maintaining the level of children in foster care, and whose interests are protected by a bureaucracy intent on securing its own survival and protecting unlimited growth. This is really sad. These are people that are actually, trying to get these laws passed to cause CPS to have accountability, but it doesn't seem like anything is happening. So, the extent of which CPS is allowed to continue to operate while being so far out of compliance with the exiting state, and federal laws in mind, boggling. Excuse me, I'm trying to readjust. It would be a challenge to find any other agency in our country's history that operated in such gross and blatant violation of the law with absolute no intervention from the administration. Tens of millions of tax dollars are being squandered on a system that is destroying families and causing lifelong emotional ruin to children. And those are the lucky ones who live through it. Yeah, you got a lot of damaged people because of CPS, and I think that the whole system needs to be revamped. I think that it needs to be accountability. They need to have somebody, you guys. Somebody needs to do something, because there are so many people still are going through interrogation. They're still going through mess with CPS, even though they have been cleared. I read a story earlier that it was a Caucasian couple. She was doing, she was doing family pictures with her daughter, and, you could tell that it was a loving home. I don't know what happened. One of the workers lied on her, and she ended up in the system, and so they sent her a letter saying that she needed to, give them the exact address where the child was. After they provided the address, the police came in, and they came in with a warrant trying to take her child, but the judge wasn't having it. He was like, no, all you asked for was an address, and you're going to try to get a warrant and search her house? You don't have a right to do it. And she wouldn't let him in, and I was so proud of her for that, because she stood her ground. But if you let them, they will come in and try to punk you and try to take you and do whatever they want. But if you stand your ground, a police cannot arrest you if you don't want them in your house. You have a right to tell them that you don't want them in your house. One of the things that I learned is that when CPS come knocking at your door, you absolutely do not have to let them in. There's no law that says that you have to let them in. Even if they bring the police with them, you absolutely you don't have to let them in. Unless if they have a search warrant, they have to have a search warrant for a probable reason, a probable cause. They can't just go get a search warrant because they feel like that's what they want to do. That's against the law. So, these are the things that I'm reading. The most egregious area of outright criminal fraud is CPS practices of filing their federally required documentation of compliance and secrecy through the courts. The federal foster care reimbursements are channeled through the title, I don't know what that is, I think that's 4E section of the Social Security Act. Each state's child welfare agency enters into a contract with the federal government, which is referred to as their Title 4E state plan. I think that's Title 4, you guys. I'm not good with Roman numerals. It is this contract that spells out the responsibilities that CPS must by law comply with in order to receive their federal funding. To document compliance with the Fed regulations, I guess CPS must file a form through the courts in each individual case. In Massachusetts, in Massachusetts, these forms are referred to as, now some of y'all might want to write this stuff down, 29-C 42 U.S. Code SS 672 reads. Okay, so the thing of it is, it's going to be on the screen, so you really don't have to write it down unless you need this, for your own purposes to see what they have to do. Okay, these requirements are not merely formalities. The Finance Committee of Congress, in preparing its summary for, you guys, this writing is so small, I'm sorry. Summary for final passage of the Adoption Assistance and Child Welfare Act of 1980, PL 96272, states, the committee is aware of allegations that the judicial determination requirements that a judge makes a determination that a child needs to be removed from the home can become a mere pro forma exercise in paper shuffling to obtain federal funding. While this could occur in some instances, the committee is unwilling to accept as a general proposition that the judiciaries of the states would so lightly treat a reasonable responsibility placed upon them by federal statute for the protection of children. Oh, I wish I had bigger writing. This is frustrating me because I really want to get this out. In 1980 U.S. Code, Congress, and Administrative News, a judicial determination of those efforts, reasonable effort as defined in Act, serves to closely examine, in the case of each individual child, whether reasonable efforts were made to keep a family intact. In accordance with the federal requirements of Massachusetts legislative enacted GI, oh Lord help me with this tiny writing, GIC 119 SS 29B, which require all judges to certify that the Department of Social Services meet the obligation grounded in the federal statute of making reasonable efforts to protect the child short of removing him or her from the parents. And if the child was removed, making it possible for the child to return home in a timely manner, rather than closely examining. In Massachusetts, this grave responsibility is carried out by the judge by rubber stamping stacks of 29C forms that simply contain 3 yes or no check boxes. In many instances, making 3 check marks is even too much work. Even making 3 check marks is too much work for the judges, and they rubber stamp the form while leaving them blank. Never mind actually verifying the reasonable efforts were made in return for these forms. DSS receives its federal money. And you guys, I really do apologize because this writing over here is so tiny that I cannot believe it, and I'm doing an okay job. And I know a lot of you guys are gonna say it's okay, but man, if you saw this screen, you'd be like, girl, how you reading that teeny bitty writing? But I blew it up for you guys, but I can't see it on my end. So, the 3 questions are: 1, continuation in the home is contrary to the well-being of the child. Number 2, reasonable efforts have been made prior to the placement of the child to prevent or eliminate the need for removal of the child from his or her home. 3, these are the questions they're asking. Reasonable efforts have been made to make it possible for the child to return to his parent guardian. So these are the questions that they need to, be accounted for. But some of them, honey, they want that money. Like I was saying, when the foster parent takes on a child and adopt them, the foster CPS gets extra money incentives. They get incentives as long as the child is out of the home with the parent. So they don't give a flip-flop whether they're hurting somebody else's child for, and all the damages that can take place. So, let me see. I don't know if I'm going to do this whole thing. I might do a part 2. No, I can go ahead and finish. Okay. Let me see. Okay. I discussed this issue a few years ago with Veronica Melendez at the Children's Bureau, the federal authority. She told me that the federal government was under the impression that all parties were present in the courtroom at the time of the filing of the 29Cs, so that the parent's attorney had the opportunity to object, rebut, or verify the reasonable efforts. In reality, no one sees the federal form except the judge and a representative of DSS's main legal department. Attorneys ask us how we ever got our hands on the 29C form, as we have never yet met an attorney who has seen the form, let alone have been notified of the filing hearing. We even have forms on which the no box were checked, yet the children were still removed from their homes and federal funds collected for them. So these people are using kids as a cash cow. That's exactly what it is. The box is checked no, and you still collecting money from a child that had no abuse in the home or anything that was causing them any type of harm. The child was happy, the child was healthy, the child was whole, the child was blossoming, and yet because you want to fill up your pockets, and you can go home and buy yourself gifts and not care that you're causing other people harm. This is really, really madness. By seizing children illegally in violation of the Title V requirements, then filing false documents in secrecy through the courts to obtain federal funding, CPS is defrauding the federal government with intent. CPS should be subjected to investigation and prosecution by the U.S. State's Attorney, the U.S. Attorney's Office, shall I say. They should be held liable for the restitution of all illegal obtained funds, real talk, for real, and prosecuted for perjury, obstruction of justice, and fraudulence. Collection of federal funds under the False Statement and Accountability Act of 1996, PL 104-292-110 Stat 3459 42 US CS 670-679A and PL 96272 CFR Part 1356 and Title 4E. I have discussed this issue with Inspector General's office, and they felt it could possibly be prosecuted under RICO, yet they have also failed to act possibly because it isn't just CPS, DSS who is committing federal fraud, but also the judges who are signing the documents. So the judges need to be put in jail for fraud. The judges need to be prosecuted. The judges need to be sued. Sorry, you actually sat there and falsified documents, or you didn't take the time to pay attention to the documentation. So I think that they should be held accountable as well. In 1988, George Miller, the original architect of PL 96272 and chairman of the Congressional Appointed Select Committee on Children, Youth, and Families, recognized the fraud being committed in the name of child protection and stated, what has been demonstrated here is that you have a system that is simply in contempt. This system has been sued. And orders have been issued, and they have continued on their merry way. And HHS just continues to look the other way. You have a system that is not only out of control, it's illegal at this point. What you are really engaged in is state-sponsored child abuse. And this is his words alone. Not my words, but this is his words. So I'm telling you guys now, please, 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 learn these rules, learn these laws. All this stuff is in here. You have to learn what they can do and what they cannot do and stand your ground. There are a lot of people now deciding to stand their ground, and I think that is absolutely wonderful, because you're sitting here talking about the kids are being abused in their homes, when you're abusing the kids on your own by taking them out of their homes, placing them into foster care systems where they're possibly being abused by other people that have no decency. Some of these people are downright evil. Some of these people have lost their everlasting mind, and you want to stick a child in a home. I got so many stories that I've read where a grandmother had two granddaughters, and they took the granddaughters away from the grandmother, placed them in the custody of their father, and the father and his the people that lived in the home with him, one of the males was a known pedophile, known sex offender, and he just had his way with those three little girls, and they did nothing to him. So I just don't get it. I don't get it. And my question, and I'm going to ask you again, if you were a social worker, CPS worker, or any type of worker in that capacity, how would you feel if you were getting up to go to work at 6 o'clock in the morning and you get a knock on your door at 7 o'clock saying it's CPS and the police, even though you are an employee, and they're telling you they're coming to remove your grandchild up out of your house because there have been reports that your daughter physically abused your grandchild, and you know that it's not true? Are you going to choose your job, or are you going to fight for your grandchild? That's my question. Which one would you do? Because I don't care. You got to answer one way or the other, and and you're at work with all the resources that are at your fingertips, with all the laws, all the forms, everybody that you are friends with. Even your supervisor turns against you because they're looking at you side-eyed now. Everybody in the office and all the people that you call for help don't want to help you because somebody put the word out, and so now you're stuck in the same situation with everybody else. What will you do then? I just want that question answered. I don't want you to say, well, it's this and this. No, I want your honest opinion. Do you care enough about your grandchildren? And maybe you're a CPS worker and you have young kids at home of your own, and somebody call in and say you did that to your kids. How would you fight for your kids? Would you fight against your job? Tell me what you would do. I want you to let me know in the comment section below. Hey, you guys, I've been doing these videos and I'm not breaking past 100. I want to see my videos get past at least 500 and even more than that. I'm working really hard and I'm trying my best, but I don't see any growth in my videos, and it's kind of discouraging. But I'm gonna keep on doing it for the people that really need my help. But I just really want this word and this message to get out that you do have rights, and this one was a total mess because, like I said, I got a new program I was trying out and the wording was so tiny I could barely get it out. So I thank you for those that do understand. Don't forget to hit that like button, that post notification bell. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and you guys, let's get these videos pumped up, because the more people that like, whether even if you dislike, hit those buttons, you guys. It doesn't matter, because over here everybody has a right to agree to disagree. And I will talk to you guys later. You guys have a blessed day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.